Welcome back, I'm Miss Evan, and this week we are making a traditional dish from Britain. So we are making a lovely cottage pie for you to share with your family. Let's get ready for practical or mise en place. So we want to be putting on an apron, putting our hair up, washing our hands, sanitising our surfaces, readying half a bowl of hot soapy water and gathering our equipment. I'm going to go through the ingredients now. You will need around 400 grams of minced beef, although you could use a vegetable mince like Quorn, or you could even use an alternative mince if you really prefer. Pork is a good option, and so is turkey. You will also need a little bit of vegetable oil, an onion, a carrot, some garlic, mixed herbs, a little bit of flour, some tomato puree, some Worcestershire sauce, a stock cube and a little bit of water. For the topping you will need around 800 grams of potatoes, which is roughly 6 medium potatoes. I have 2 baking potatoes here today, and I'm going to substitute part of my potato with some sweet potato, which will increase fibre and sweetness. You will need 25 grams of butter, 3 tablespoons of milk and around 60 grams of cheese. First thing we're going to do is prepare our potatoes so that they can go in, because they'll take a little time to soften, ready to be mashed. So we're going to peel them first of all. You use whatever peeler you have at home, whatever you prefer, and we'll put all of our peelings into our bits bowl, ready to go into the compost or the bin. Remember when you are peeling that you want to keep your fingers really clear. If you were to peel, you're going downwards, you're going to catch your fingers like so. So keep your fingers on the side. You could even put them down on the chopping board if you find that easier. You can peel towards you or away, whichever you find more straightforward, but just always making sure that safety is your first priority. Next we need to chop our potatoes into fairly small cubes, about 2 centimetre square little cubes. Remember that when we are using our vegetable or utility knife, that we have our fingers like so, with our thumb on the side like a magnet, and we're always using the bridge or the claw. Your fingernails should be always touching the food, tucked right under, so that the worst that would happen is that you're scratching your nail rather than cutting your fingers. So I'm going to cut all the way through, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it in half, and I'm going to use the claw. I'm going to cut along like so, and cut along like so, and flip this over, cut that in half, and now I can just use the claw and chop little pieces all the way along. There we go. And they're nice and even pieces, and it's nice and quick. You can do the same for these ones here, all the way along, all the way along. Match them up, claw all the way across, like so. So I'm ready to cook my potatoes, ready to mash. Now I've got my potatoes in a steamer to go on top of my pan. Now if you want to boil your potatoes, you absolutely can. You can just pop them into your deep saucepan and put the water on top. If you do so, do make sure that you put in a really generous amount of salt into the water with it. Now that serves a really important purpose. It's not for seasoning, it's actually to keep the nutrients in, and that's where steaming actually has a real benefit over boiling. So because of the process of osmosis, by where molecules move from high concentration to low concentration, i.e. they will move out of the potato into the water. By adding salt to it, you are balancing that osmotic potential and reducing that likelihood, so actually you'll keep the nutrients in. By steaming them, actually you don't risk that at all, so I would recommend steaming if you can. So I'm just going to put my boiled water into my pan, pouring it over the top just to start the cooking process. Pop the lid on. Always make sure that you have a lid on because it reduces the amount of energy needed, otherwise all the heat escapes. I'm going to turn mine on because mine's electric. Put it on up here, and I want it on high to, oops, there we go, want it on high to really get it cooking. So mine goes all the way up to a 9. I'm going to put it on an 8 for now to get that water boiling. And please make sure that the handle is always to the side, obviously not over another hob. Now we don't want the temperature on high for the entire time. We want to get the temperature in the water all the way up, and then we'll reduce the temperature down to probably at a 5 or a 6. So that it's just on a simmer, on a rolling boil to keep that steam moving. And we'll come back when they're soft. While the potatoes are simmering, we can prepare our other vegetables. So I'm going to start with an onion. Now hopefully you can recall the proper way to prepare an onion. We're going to go through it very briefly. So first of all, if it rolls, what do? We cut it in half. We cut it from pole to pole, not around the equator. So I'm going to cut from the stalk to the root, all the way down, using a nice action, clearing my chopping board of any debris from any roots and bits that I don't want to introduce into my food. Then I'm going to, using the claw, cut off the stalk parts, not too much, just enough. And now we can peel it. So using my thumbnail, getting underneath the skin. There we go, ready to go. Next we're going to cut parallel to the chopping board this way into our onion. Make sure that your fingers are right on the top, because if your fingers are back here and your knife was to slip, you're going to cut yourself. You can cut once or twice depending on how confident you're feeling or how big your onion is. There we go. And on the other side, so fingers right out of the way. Give it a bit of a wiggle if you need to. Oh. And we're not cutting all the way through, we're only cutting to about a finger's width from the end, from the root. Okay, so I've cut parallel in. Next we're going to cut columns, so facing you, it's going to be up facing towards the root. So for me, I swing it around, I'm going to use the claw, tip of the knife all the way down, tip of the knife all the way down. The closer you can get your columns, the better. As you get towards the end, your fingers are going to slip, so do what you can and then change to the bridge technique, making sure you are keeping your thumb very clear indeed. And lastly, we're going to do our dice. So we've cut this way, and now we're going to cut this way. Use your pinky and your thumb to really squeeze it together. You should be able to lift it using just those fingers and brace onto it using the claw, making sure your nails are right on top, and cut your little squares free, like so, holding on to the end. If you have much left, of course you can cut some of it free, maximise the amount of food that you're including, but we're keeping the root end intact, and I can't even feel the sensation. Don't need to cry. Do it the right way and neither will you. Now I'm going to add about a tablespoon's worth of oil into my saucepan, and I'm going to add my onion. If you're confident, about your timings. You could start cooking it now, or you can just wait until we're ready to add everything else. Next, we're going to peel and grate the carrot. Remember to peel the wider end first of all, just rotating it as you go, because once you've peeled it, it gets very slippery and you're going to struggle to hold on to it if you've done the narrow end first of all. So now that I've got something to hold on to, I can peel the other end all the way around. There we go. And using the claw, I'm just going to remove the end, but I'm not going to cut off this end because it gives me something to hold on to while I'm grating. So we want to make sure we've got the right size. So this is an intermediate grate, which I don't want a zest, don't want a slice, I want this big guy here. So I'm going to hold onto the top of the grater, not the sides. You can have it sideways or facing away from you, it's your personal preference. Use up and down motion, long strokes, and grate the whole carrot. You see, and by leaving the top of the carrot, I had something to hold on to, so I'm not going to risk my fingers. So you can see I've turned the heat down on my potatoes and they're currently steeping. I'm just going to keep an eye on them and test them in a minute. So we're going to turn on our hob for our onions. I want that on a reasonably high heat. Got my little bit of oil in there ready to go. Now I want to cook this for a couple of minutes before I add anything else in, otherwise that's going to overcook. So I'm going to check the potatoes and see how they're doing. Just minding the steam because obviously it is very, very hot. Now, regardless of whether you have it in water or in the steamer, you want to grab a piece and use the fork test. Can you spike it through without any resistance? And can you mash it up against the side really easily? Which I definitely can there. Might just want to just check for another piece or two just to make sure that's not the only one. That is definitely ready for mashing. So I'm going to turn that off and come back to it in a minute. So my onion has been cooking for about a minute or two. So I have my carrot, which I'm going to add in. I'm actually going to turn my heat down a little bit as well. And now I'm going to add a clove of garlic. So just using your thumbs, break open your head of garlic. Now you can peel them if you want. I don't tend to bother. I'm just going to pop them into my garlic crusher. I love this one, it's rotational. And I'm just going to squeeze the garlic through like so. I'm going to take a teaspoon, give it a little nudge around, give it another press, and release the garlic from there and give it a little mix around. So I can see that the onions are starting to turn translucent now and the carrot's starting to cook down, which is terrific. That's what I want so far. So we can tip our meat in and we will want to rinse this out before we put it in the recycling. So I'm going to break up my mince and I'm going to mix it around really thoroughly. And we will know when the mince is done because it turns from pink to brown. This will take between 5 and 10 minutes depending on your heat. Make sure you stir it periodically and so that you are not allowing it to burn at the bottom of the pan. So I'll see you in 5 to 10. While my mince is cooking away, I'm going to sort my potatoes because they're ready. Now, if you had them in some water, you will want to employ a colander. Make sure that you are removing anything out of the washing up bowl. You place your colander in and you tip all the water through, keeping your hands nice and clear. Obviously, I don't need a colander today, so I've just removed my water and I'm going to pop my potato right into here. So I'm going to add my butter and I'm going to add about 3 tablespoons of milk. Don't need to be too precise, but it's just making sure we don't add too little or too much. Now with the potato masher, I'm going to give it a really good mash and mix all that butter in, making it really delicious. If you wanted to, you could add some additional herbs. That's obviously completely your personal preference. I like to add oregano to my mash, not too much, just a little sprinkle. Just really brings out the flavour of the potatoes, particularly when you're using sweet potato. It's really delicious. My mince has been cooking for around 5 minutes. Now we're ready to add our additional flavourings. So we want about a tablespoon of tomato puree. I'm not going to pop it in there, I'm just going to approximate. I want a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. And a teaspoon of mixed herbs. Then we can give it a good mix around. Oh, that smells divine. I'm going to add a crack of black pepper, a good pinch of salt, and now I have my stock cube and my boiling water, and I want around 300 millilitres of broth all the way in. Now I want to make sure that I'm stirring it to incorporate it all. And now we're going to leave it for 10 to 15 minutes, and we're actually going to leave it on a low simmer. I'm going to turn it down to a 3. And we actually want it to reduce down this time. So I'm going to not put a lid on, I'm going to leave the lid off because I want quite a bit of that water to evaporate. I want it to reduce down. But you need to keep an eye on it, you need to stir it periodically, every couple of minutes for the next 10 to 15 minutes. So I'll see you then. While that's cooking, you can preheat your oven to 200 degrees or gas mark 6. You can grate your cheese ready for your topping, and you can do your washing up. So it's been about 15 minutes, and the flour that's in there has really helped thicken the sauce. You shouldn't see, if you move the food aside, you shouldn't see a lot of liquid running into the space. So you have a certain amount of evaporation of the water, but also the flour gelatinizing and doing its job as well. That looks great. So I'm going to turn that off. And the last thing we want to do is to season to taste. So I have a clean teaspoon. I'm going to take a little bit, try and get a little bit of everything, a little bit of onion, a little bit of carrot. Make sure I'm going to blow on it so it's nice and cool. That's really nice. With the addition of the stock cube and the extra good pinch of salt and the pepper that I added earlier, actually that is well seasoned. I don't need to add anything extra. If you wanted to, of course, you could always add just another pinch of salt or another pinch of pepper as you desire. So the last thing to do is to assemble in an oven safe dish. So I'm going to simply gently pour all of my mix into the bottom of the pan. Make sure that you scrape the sides. More food and less washing up is what I always say. We want to evenly distribute the sauce around. Presentation is just as important as flavour. The last thing to do is to add our mashed potato topping. Now, I put about a third of my cheese into the mashed potato just after I mashed it, and I mashed it all together to give that lovely creaminess. Now I'm going to take a spoon and I'm going to spoon out a large lump, and I'm just going to decant it with another spoon or a fork, and I'm going to layer them like so, spoon at a time. And if there's some gaps, that's fine, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I can now even it out, fill any remaining gaps that I have and make it look delightful. So I'm going to use my fork and encourage the mashed potato all around. I want a nice even layer, we don't want any spots that don't have any. You can see with the sweet potato, in addition, it's given a lovely colour as well. So if you give it a generous, fun little fork like so, actually those high areas will catch the heat a little bit more and they'll turn a little bit more golden as well, which is actually really lovely because then you get those little crispy bits, which is really delightful. And I'm going to top with a sprinkle of cheese to get a lovely golden colour and a lovely cheesy finish. What a simple classic dish that you can make for your whole family. Don't forget, of course, you can substitute for different types of mince, whatever you find you prefer. And if in case you're interested, the reason it's called cottage pie is because it uses beef rather than a shepherd's pie, which uses lamb, of course. So I hope you enjoy making that with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye. This traditional British dish. Traditional British dish. Traditional British dish. And this week we are making a traditional dish from Britain.